The morning sun stretched long shadows across the worn pavement of the parking lot at Dottie's Diner, a time-worn roadside stop that had fed travelers along Route 66 in New Mexico for over 4 decades. Inside, the familiar hum of frying eggs, clinking mugs, and soft chatter wove a comforting rhythm into another typical day. Emily Harper glided between the faded leather booths with practiced ease, her 38-year-old frame bearing the weight of a past few could fathom. Her auburn hair was tied back in a neat bun, and she wore the standard uniform of navy pants and a crisp white blouse, its sleeves tugged down reflexively during her shift. The burn scars that snaked across her right shoulder, neck, and arm were impossible to fully conceal, despite her careful wardrobe choices. They were the kind of scars that drew stares and hushed speculation, the kind that sparked imagined tales of mishaps, fires, or tragedies too grim to grasp. What the patrons at Dottie's Diner didn't know was that Emily's scars told a story of valor, not misfortune. They were lasting marks of an IED blast near Fallujah in 2007, when Army medic Emily Harper had thrown herself over an injured soldier to shield him from the explosion that ended her military career but saved his life. For 4 years, Emily had worked the early shift at the diner, serving coffee and hearty meals to truckers, tourists, and locals who had come to rely on her quiet skill. She never mixed up an order, always brought extra napkins for families with kids, and carried herself with a professionalism that earned respect, even from those who murmured about her looks. The regulars had learned to leave questions unasked. Some guessed at her past, a car crash, perhaps, or a chemical burn. Others simply accepted her as part of the diner's fabric, valuing her efficiency and the way she anticipated their needs without idle chatter. Emily preferred it that way. Anonymity was a choice she'd made after her medical discharge from the Army. The medals tucked away in her nightstand, including a Purple Heart and a Silver Star with V device, stayed hidden, as did the faded 2nd Infantry tattoo on her forearm, always kept covered. In this quiet corner of New Mexico, she was just Emily, the waitress, not Staff Sergeant Emily Harper, combat medic who had saved 19 lives during 3 tours in Iraq before her service ended in pain and fire. The morning bustle had settled into its usual pace when a group of out-of-town oil workers arrived, their boisterous voices and crude laughter jarring the diner's calm. They were part of a drilling project nearby and had made Dottie's their breakfast spot, much to Emily's chagrin. "Hey, Burface," called out Jake, the group's apparent ringleader, as Emily approached with a coffee pot. "Don't splash any on us, we don't want to end up like you." His buddies chuckled at the harsh jab, their eyes tracking Emily as she poured coffee with steady hands, her face betraying no response to their taunts. She'd learned long ago that reacting only fueled them, and silence was often her only shield against such cruelty. "What happened to you, anyway?" another worker asked, his voice loud enough to carry. "House fire? Train wreck? Or did someone do that to you on purpose?" Emily continued her work, refilling mugs and taking orders with calm precision. Her military training had taught her to stay composed under fire, to function even when under attack. These men weren't insurgents, they were just thoughtless civilians who'd never learned decency. At a corner booth, an older couple exchanged uneasy glances but stayed silent. At the counter, a trucker buried his face in his sports magazine, avoiding eye contact. The other patrons had grown used to these morning taunts, most opting to ignore the harassment rather than step in. "I bet she can't even smile with that scar tissue," Jake pressed, emboldened by the lack of pushback from Emily or the others. "Must be why she's stuck in a place like this. Who'd hire someone who looks like that?" Emily's grip on the coffee pot tightened slightly, but her expression remained neutral. She thought of the soldiers she'd treated in field hospitals, young men and women who'd endured far worse wounds with grit and resolve. Their courage gave her the strength to weather these small cruelties. It was then that the diner's door swung open with a gentle jingle, and a man in his mid-40s stepped inside. He wore worn khakis, work boots, and a faded navy cap that had seen better days. His posture was unmistakably military, shoulders square, eyes sharp, scanning the room with the measured caution of someone trained to spot danger. James Carter had been driving cross-country, taking his time to explore towns he'd missed during his years of service. The diner promised honest food and strong coffee, just what he needed after a night in a budget motel. As he slid into a booth by the window, his gaze landed on Emily navigating the tables. Something about her poise caught his eye, the way she held herself with quiet dignity despite the oil workers' obvious harassment. He'd seen that kind of resilience before, in war zones where professionalism could mean survival. When Emily reached his table, her sleeve shifted slightly as she poured coffee, revealing a glimpse of scarred skin and something else, a faded tattoo. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice steady and neutral as it was with every customer. "Please," James replied, studying her with the focus of someone piecing together a memory. "And thank you." As Emily poured, he noted her movements, deliberate, efficient, with the spatial awareness of someone used to high-stakes environments. When she turned to leave, her sleeve slipped again, and this time he saw more of the tattoo. The faint outline of 2nd Infantry made his breath catch. The 2nd Infantry Division had been legendary in Iraq, known for its tenacity and its elite medics. James's mind flashed back to a rubble-strewn road in Fallujah 2007 where an IED had nearly killed him. He remembered the chaos, the pain, and, most vividly, the hands of a medic who'd kept him alive under gunfire. He hadn't seen her face through the dust and blood, but her calm voice had anchored him. Meanwhile, the oil workers' taunts grew bolder. "Hey, fireface," Jake called as Emily passed their table again. "My pancakes are cold. Maybe if you hustled instead of dragging around like a busted doll, the food would still be hot." Emily paused, her posture steady despite the verbal assault. "I'll have the kitchen make fresh ones," she said evenly, reaching for the plate. "Don't touch it with those charred hands," another worker snapped, his tone dripping with disgust. "Who knows what you're carrying?" The cruelty sent a ripple of unease through the diner. Even the regulars, who usually ignored the taunts, glanced up, their faces tinged with discomfort at their own silence. A young girl at a nearby table, oblivious to the adult tension, looked at Emily with wide eyes. "Miss, did it hurt?" she asked, pointing at the scars. Emily's expression softened. "Not as much as being invisible," she replied quietly, her words carrying a depth no one in the diner could fully grasp. James felt a spark of recognition. That voice, that steady calm in the face of chaos, he'd heard it before, in the darkest moment of his life. He stood and walked toward Emily, his pulse quickening with the possibility of a connection he'd thought lost. "Excuse me," he said as she cleared the workers' table. "Can I ask you something?" Emily met his gaze, noting the respect in his tone and the military bearing that marked him as a kindred spirit. "Of course." James's eyes flicked to her forearm where the sleeve had shifted again, revealing more of the tattoo. "That tattoo," he said softly. "2nd Infantry. You served in Iraq." The question hung heavy, a challenge to the anonymity Emily had guarded for years. But something in James's eyes, respect, not curiosity, made her nod. "3 tours," she said simply. "Medic." James's face paled as memories aligned. "Fallujah, 2007. IED on Route Cedar. You were the medic who," his voice faltered. "Who what?" Emily asked, though she sensed where this was heading. "Who saved my life," James finished, his voice thick. "Lance Corporal James Carter, 1st Battalion. You dragged me from that burning Humvee and kept me breathing for 45 minutes until the chopper arrived." The diner fell silent, the usual hum fading as patrons sensed something profound unfolding. Even the oil workers paused, watching the exchange. Emily studied James's face, and slowly recognition flickered. "You were the one with the shrapnel in your leg," she said quietly. "You kept asking about your team. They all made it home because of you," James said, his voice carrying across the quiet diner. "Every one of them." The revelation shifted the room's atmosphere. The oil workers looked uneasy, beginning to grasp that their target was no victim but a hero. The regulars felt a pang of shame for their silent complicity in Emily's harassment. James removed his Navy cap, holding it over his heart in a gesture of deep respect. "Staff Sergeant Harper," he said, loud enough for all to hear, "thank you for my life." The silence that followed was so complete that the coffee machine's gurgle seemed to echo. Emily stood still, her carefully built wall of anonymity crumbling as every eye turned to her. Jake and his crew looked stunned, the realization that they'd mocked a decorated veteran sinking in. Their cruel jabs about her scars, their taunts about her appearance, all now stood exposed as attacks on a hero. You're a war hero?" one worker stammered. Emily's response was pure her. "I'm not a hero," she said quietly. "I was just doing my duty." But James wouldn't let her downplay it. "Your duty," he said, his voice firm, "was to save lives under fire. Your duty was to charge into danger while others fled. And you did it with courage most can't fathom." The older couple, regulars for years, stood from their booth. The husband doffed his hat. "Thank you for your service, Sergeant," the wife said, her voice trembling. "We're sorry we didn't know." The moment deepened as other patrons grappled with their months of inaction. "We should have spoken up," muttered the trucker at the counter, his magazine forgotten. "We should have had her back." Tom Ruiz, the diner's manager, stepped out from the kitchen, his face flushed with shame for not protecting his employee and anger at the patrons who'd made her life harder. "Ma'am," he said to Emily, his tone formal, "take the rest of your shift off with pay. And know that anyone who disrespects you here will be shown the door." The oil workers faced their own reckoning. Their behavior, once dismissed as harmless fun, was now revealed as cruel harassment of a wounded veteran. The shame was palpable. "We didn't know," Jake said, his earlier bravado gone. "If we'd known you were a veteran, would it have mattered?" Emily asked, her quiet question cutting through their excuses. "Should it take a uniform to earn respect?" Her words forced everyone to confront their biases. How many other veterans lived among them, unseen? How many were judged by their looks, not their deeds? James stepped closer to Emily, offering silent support. "You don't owe anyone answers," he told her. "You've given enough." But Emily faced her own turning point. For 4 years, she'd hidden her service to avoid pity and questions. Now that shield was gone, and she wasn't sure how to navigate the change. "I just wanted to be left alone," she said, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted to work without explaining myself." "And you shouldn't have to," James said firmly. "But now that the truth's out, maybe things can change. Maybe you'll get the respect you've earned." The diner's atmosphere transformed instantly. Word of Emily's identity spread through the small restaurant as patrons whispered, sharing the news that their quiet waitress was a decorated medic who'd saved lives in Iraq. James stayed by her side, his presence a shield and validation. He saw the struggle in her eyes, the tug between privacy and the reality that her secret was out. "Staff Sergeant Harper," he said gently, "I know this isn't what you planned, but maybe it's what was meant to happen." Emily scanned the diner, seeing the faces of patrons who'd watched her work for years without truly seeing her. The older couple who'd thanked her, the trucker now looking at her with respect, even Tom Ruiz treating her with newfound deference. The oil workers were slinking out, their meals untouched, grappling with their shame. Jake approached Emily hesitantly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice unsteady, "I'm sorry. What we did, what we said, there's no excuse. We were wrong." Emily studied him, seeing genuine remorse. "Apology accepted," she said. "But carry this lesson forward before you judge someone by their scars." The pivotal moment came when James addressed the room, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Folks, I need you to know who this woman is. Staff Sergeant Emily Harper wasn't just in Iraq, she was one of her unit's finest medics." He faced Emily, his eyes full of gratitude. "She saved my life on April 22, 2007, when our convoy hit an IED outside Fallujah. I was bleeding out and she worked on me for 45 minutes under fire until the medevac came." The diner was hushed as he continued. "But I wasn't the only one. During her 3 tours, Sergeant Harper saved over 100 soldiers. She earned a Purple Heart for her wounds, a Silver Star with V device for bravery, and the respect of every soldier she served with." Emily felt tears prick her eyes, unaccustomed to hearing her service laid bare. "The scars you see," James said, his voice rising, "are marks of valor. They prove that when her country called, she answered. When soldiers fell, she ran to them. And when a blast threatened me, she shielded me with her own body." The older woman in the corner booth wept openly, her husband's arm around her. Other patrons dabbed their eyes, overwhelmed by the truth. Tom Ruiz stepped forward. "Sergeant Harper, you've got a job here as long as you want it. Anyone who disrespects you answers to me." The climax peaked when a young Air Force officer in uniform entered, drawn by the buzz he'd overheard in the parking lot. Sensing the moment's weight, he snapped to attention, saluting Emily. "Ma'am," he said, "it's an honor. Thank you for your service." Overwhelmed, Emily returned the salute, her first since her discharge. The gesture reconnected her to a part of herself she'd buried. James pulled a faded photo from his wallet, a snapshot of his squad taken days before the attack that nearly killed him. "I've carried this for 18 years, he said, showing it to Emily. "Every face here made it home because of medics like you." The photo showed 10 young soldiers, their faces alight with camaraderie. Emily knew the type, a treasure for families, a talisman for survivors. "I never thought I'd find you," James said. "I've thought of you every day since Fallujah, hoping you were okay. Finding you here, seeing you're all right, it's an answer to a prayer." The moment closed when Emily made a choice that surprised her. For the first time in years, she spoke openly about her service, sharing not just the facts but the feelings she'd locked away. "I loved being a medic," she said, her voice steadying. "I loved knowing I could bring someone home to their family. Losing that purpose when I was discharged, it hurt more than the burns." Her words forged a bridge of understanding that would reshape her life and the community's view of the veterans among them. 6 months later, Dottie's Diner had become a haven for veterans, drawn by stories of the medic who served coffee with the same care she'd once brought to saving lives. Emily had wrestled with her new visibility but grew to value the connections it sparked. Veterans from across the Southwest stopped by, sharing stories and finding solace in a place where their service was honored. "It's odd," Emily told visitors. "I spent years hiding my past, but sharing it has healed me more than I expected." James Carter became a frequent guest, their friendship deepening into a bond rooted in shared experience. The oil workers had changed too. Jake and his crew not only apologized publicly but raised $20,000 for a veterans charity. "Meeting Sergeant Harper changed me," Jake told a reporter. "You never know what someone's sacrificed." Tom Ruiz introduced new policies, including free meals for veterans on holidays and a wall of honor showcasing local heroes' stories. Emily's tale spread from local news to national outlets, inspiring similar programs nationwide. Most profoundly, Emily found new purpose, volunteering at the local VA, using her skills to help veterans navigate care. Her ability to bridge military and civilian worlds made her a vital advocate. "I thought my service ended with my discharge," she said at a veterans event, "but service isn't just a uniform. It's using what you know to help others wherever you are." The waitress once mocked for her scars had become a beacon of hidden heroism, reminding communities to see beyond appearances and honor the veterans who serve quietly among them, carrying their valor with grace.